Welcome back to Spank Ranch Garage. These hoses are kind of a joke. Let's make some hard lines to clean this situation up. Yeah, boys, the workbench is a mess, but we are jamming several projects simultaneously right now, so it's just gotta wait for the next regroup. But anyway, we're gonna bend some tubing, and my tubing bender is broken, so we need to make a new part for it, and then we'll be ready to start bending again. The Chinese cast aluminum strikes again, so we're gonna make a new pawl out of some 1/2-inch plate steel. If you're gonna run cheap Chinese tools, you gotta be able to make your own parts. So I made this new, I guess it's a tube holding pawl or something, and it locks the tube into the bender like that. With the aluminum that came on this, it broke immediately, like as soon as I tried to bend. So now that will hold the tube and you can make your bend. Now this is pretty thick wall tubing. This bender is not made for this. It's made for like thin copper and aluminum. So maybe with a little heat, we can actually make this work, or maybe it's just trash and we go back to torch bending. Let's see. All right, a little bit of oil and it did its job. I think this is 058 wall. We'll get into that in just a second, but now we can bend. Now we got a flare. It'll do 180s too, and that's going to be exceptionally handy for this project. All right, so the reason we're doing this is because this old 410 John Deere has an Extenda-Hoe, and this is actually what John Deere did with the cylinder curl hoses. This is how it left the factory. I thought somebody rigged this up. I looked at pictures. They did this all the way up to the D model in the 90s. So this is just very vulnerable. At full curl, the bucket can actually pinch these up into the stick and tear them up. So I built some auxiliaries for this machine here with these hard lines, and I kind of copied this design from Case, what they do with their Extenda-Hose, where you've got hard lines and then this rubber hose is 6 feet long, so when the boom goes out, it kind of unrolls and then rolls right back into position, stays out of the way for the most part. Now I've already rammed this into a tree, unfortunately, right after building it, which is unfortunate, but it survived. It is what it is. It's going to happen. So really what needs to happen here is we're going to replicate something similar on the other side. We'll weld right onto the side of this bracket here, and we'll have two hard lines terminate just like these. We'll have another coil of hose over here, which then needs to tie back to these fittings. So for the tubing, this is 1/2-inch OD by 083 wall. It's rated for, I think, 3,500 PSI. And it is made for hydraulic service like this. I get this from McMaster Car. There's the part number there. I'll post all this down below in the description if you guys want to follow along, build your own. And then you also need your tube nuts and your backup ferrules or backup cups, whatever you want to call them. All of this is readily available from McMaster Car, usually 1 day shipping and you have it. And it's really not priced too bad if I remember right. So I made a rough measurement. I'm ready to cut my 6-foot length to what we need. I'm using a rigid number 15 tube cutter. Probably not made for this kind of wall thickness steel either, but it does work. I've cut many of these on the original blade. It's all good. You can get this right at Home Depot or Amazon, wherever your preferred shopping venue is. When you cut this, it does leave a pretty hefty internal burr, so I use a countersink bit and just clean it up. That way we're back to full bore. And sometimes you get just a little bit of flare on the outside here you gotta take down. Now before you even think about flaring, put your nut on, put your backup cup ferrule thing on. Come on, baby. All right, because the worst thing is when you get a nice flare on here and you realize you never put any hardware on. That'll happen. All right, so for this flaring, we're gonna use a rigid 377, I believe it is. Yep, it's a 37-degree flare tool. That's important because a lot of flare tools are 45 degrees. You cannot use that on JIC fittings. They are 37 degree, so you must have a flare tool that matches. This one, like most of the stuff we're using, is not probably rated to flare this kind of wall thickness, but it does work. So this is a pretty nice system. The way that the actual flare tool clamps the whole thing together so it doesn't slip. I've never had this one slip yet. It's a little tricky to get set up. Make sure everything's right and centered. Crank her down. A little bit of oil on the wedge. Now this one works a little different than most. So basically, you've got a cone that goes down into the tube to flare it, and usually like on a brake line one, it just pushes straight in. This actually runs eccentrically on a bearing, so it's actually roll forming the flare as you go, and I think that's probably why it works for this thick wall thickness without too much trouble. You can do most of it by hand, but you will have to transition to a wrench at some point to get a little more out of it. And the actual height and how big you make the flare is up to you. So you need to play with it until you're happy with it. I have a couple test fittings here that I'll use to test it. You'll see this thing clutches out at some point, right? It clutches out. This is where you're gonna take it further with the wrench. So we have a flare forming, but we're not there yet. So I'll go like another 2 turns with a wrench. Maybe 2.5, 3. It's been a little while since I've done one, so I don't remember exactly what my numbers were. You can also get this right at Home Depot too, which is awesome. Now they may not stock it, you may have to order it online because 37 degree is not your most common flare angle. So now sorry this doesn't focus, I'm not using a good camera, but now you got your nice 37 degree flare there. Bring your nut up. Your backup cup here won't fit perfectly right away, but after you put a fitting in this and thread it together, everything's gonna mate up really nice. So I usually take a 1/2 inch fitting, I'll test it out, that's good. You have good flare engagement. So you don't want it right on the edge of the flare, you don't want it coming all the way up here. You want the majority of it to land on the tapered surface here of that. That looks good. Bring her up, thread it together. Oops. And then I'll actually tighten up a spare fitting, pull everything together here. That way when you go to install it on the machine, there's no surprises. All right, so now after that, everything is formed and nice. Everything fits great, good thread engagement. It's ready to use. Now, whether this is the right way to do it, probably not. This isn't how a shop would make these lines. But for me, I was having trouble finding a shop to make me hard lines. We'll have to reposition a few times here. And this is why you buy a $30 bender, so you have no regrets about jamming it in a vise. All right, that should be pretty darn close to 180. All right, we're actually a little open from 180 here, so we'll do a little hand adjustment to make it perfect, but that's pretty darn nice. want to see what the cylinder side of this is. I think it might be O-ring Boss. I probably have one of these. I probably don't have two, of course. Yep. O-ring Boss at -10 probably. Yeah, of course I only have one. But anyway, that brings us straight to JIC, so we're not playing games with all the NPT crap. Dang, I wish I had another one, but I'm going to have to figure something else out for the other side at this point. Oh, boys, it's our lucky day. I found another -10 to -8. I use these green plastic clamps from Surplus Center to hold these lines. These are actually made for like a 1-wire 1/4-inch hydraulic hose. The diameter comes out just about perfect for a 1/2-inch hard line. They have them in 3/4, a couple other sizes, so if you're doing bigger lines, I think this is a great way to attach them to the machine. You just weld the base plate on, it's already threaded. Once the weld cools, throw it together, bolt it up. They seem pretty tough, they're cheap, they're like $2 each, can't beat it. Cylinder side looking good. Got a little 3-way bend here, bring it down, dog leg over, runs parallel to our first tube here, and then just like the other side, they will terminate up here. So I'll cut these back, flare them, put -8 males on them. That'll be ready to accept hose then. So that gets us to this point. Now I need to figure out how we're going to run hard lines from this to about here, grab the one from the other side, maybe down under and over. And then basically we'll just go hose to hose and... All right, so I got a 1/2-inch male NPT to half jick. And one thing you guys got to know is look at the taper on this. All right, you see that internal cone, then the internal cone there, inside that fitting. We call these NPT, but they're really not. I mean, they are a tapered X outside thread, and they will accept pipe fitting, or at least the male ones will accept a female pipe. But if you just rammed a standard pipe nipple in here, you'd probably damage the fitting on the machine side. It may burrow its way in and make a taper, but it's not right. So typically you wouldn't use NPT in hydraulic systems because they just always leak, but this is not real NPT. It's still a tapered fit, just like a a 45-degree SAE or a 37-degree JIC. It's the same kind of deal, just different threads, probably some antiquated way of doing things, but they've been very reliable for me. Something like this, come out of here, up, over, mount to the boom here, and then it kicks out just like I did on the other side. That way those hoses stay off of this area. They'll curl back, land up here. But guys, I am out of tubing, so I apologize in retrospect. No video this week. Got to order some more tubing. Once that comes in, we'll wrap this up and I'll show you how it all works in the end. The other piece of tubing showed up. So we're going to come out here under the boom, tucked nice and close. Decided to go under instead of over so I wouldn't have to hop these lines. Sneak through here, none of that crap. I think I got everything set up the right way here. It's a little intimidating because you only get one shot at it. That's going to come off of there like that and then bend it straight up. So as long as it doesn't move in the bender, we should be pretty good. Beautiful. All right, so now you got these off-axis bends here. Let's give it a test fit. Nice and tight there, nothing to hang out or get caught on anything. So it's good to bend a spare scrap piece and put a line on it where the bend begins. That way you can kind of predict where your bend, how much material it's going to eat up and what that radius is. You could calculate it, but it's easier for me just to visualize. So I get that to where I want it, and then we'll mark it here. So now I know where the bend needs to start. And then also I will mark a line perpendicular to the bend. And that'll be my center line for you're doing off-axis bending. it's helpful to see where you got to be. Mark here. The reason I make the mark up here is because if this started to pull through instead of slide in this piece here, it'll screw up your bend radius. So that looks like it. Let's give it a go. Now I don't like the angle of it 100%, but we got enough of a lever here to get a little twist into her. Make it run parallel with the boom, and it'll drop right in like that. Now our mission is to make this one fit in the lower hole there. Another thing to mention while we're on the topics, I know it's coming up in the comments, is the size of the hydraulic hard lines. So here in this case, we're using 1/2 inch with like an 083 wall. That doesn't give you a whole lot of bore here. It's maybe 3/8 or so. Depending how new the machine is, or how big it is, or how big the cylinders are, you want to size them accordingly. So 1/2 inch is pretty small for this backhoe, and for this curl cylinder here, I believe that's like a 3.5 inch cylinder. It's definitely on the small side. Now the reason I'll get away with it here is because this machine is so old and slow that this will not be a limiting factor in the flow. Actually, I've already tested it on another accessory and it seems to perform well. But on a newer machine, especially an excavator, these high flow machines that move very quick, you're going to want to size this up quite a bit. I would assume you'd want to use 5/8 or 3/4 for it. The flare tool that I showed you will do that. This bender will not, however. So to run bigger lines, you're going to have to find your own way to bend them. I've had really good luck heating them up with a torch and very slowly bending them, moving the heat through the radius as you bend. I've never had a 3000 psi hydraulic tube collapse on me. They have enough wall thickness, they bend like butter when you get them hot. So that would be an option for that. Flaring is the same. You're probably gonna have to put a little more ass into it to make it happen, but it'll do it. McMaster sells all the nuts and backup cups for those other sizes as well. So if I was working on something different here, I would certainly be upsizing these lines. Now, most skid steers, especially older ones, they already have like 3/8 hoses on them. You'll easily get away with this, maybe even smaller. But on this old girl, it's all 1/2 inch lines anyway, so all those fittings have the same inside bore as this. I'm really not too worried about it. So you're gonna be going through 1/2 inch fittings anyway. A 1/2 inch fitting does not have a 1/2 inch bore. 380, so a little over 3/8 of an inch on the fitting. And the tube comes out to very similar to that. 3.3, so the tube is a little small for the fittings. Now this won't affect the power of the machine, but it will change potentially how fast it can operate in that when it's using these tubes. So ideally I would have went 5/8 with these, but I think we'll get away with 1/2 inch. Yeah, it's a textbook flare there. See if the cup will come off. Usually they don't once you press them in. You can see you got nice even witness mark all the way around the middle of the flare. Now obviously you're going to clean these tubes before you use them. Cup fits nice. Nut goes over. You got yourself homemade JIC. While we're waiting for the paint to dry on the new lines, I got the other ones we built all mounted up, tight, mounted. They get close here, but nothing touches, nothing will wear through. And then they terminate here, and I stagger the ends so I can get a wrench on this fitting, wrench on this fitting. So as soon as that paint dries, we'll get this put back together, get the hoses on, show you how it all works. For hoses, I've been buying them from Surplus Center. If you need one that is just a regular length, like a standard length, these are 60 inch. You could get, well, no, I think these are actually 72 inch, but either way, you can get nominal sizes there. If you need custom sizes, they won't do it. You got to go to a local shop. And then we're also going to use their protector stuff here. This stuff's pretty cheap, maybe $2 a foot or something like that. It's nice because it holds these hoses in a bundle. Gives them some protection from the sun, protection from rubbing on things, but also mostly just keeps them from splaying apart. Might have gave me a little extra there, but we'll get her on. All right, there it is. Painted, kind of crappy. But anyway, here's the hoses here, and basically you could see, someone else asked about this in another video. So these old John Deere Extenda-Hoes up to the D model, so the 410 straight all the way to the D. In the 90s, the stick comes out of the, I never know what to call it. I would call this the stick and this the dipper arm, whatever. But the inside of it slides out and it carries the curl cylinder with it. Somebody was asking last video when I did these lines how this works because it doesn't make sense, and I understand. So we mounted the top lines here to the back of the cylinder boss, and then they also mount down here at the end of the extendable dipper arm, or whatever John Deere calls it. So that way this whole assembly, these lines and this cylinder all move as an assembly. And that'll be obvious when I start this thing up. So we applied the exact same concept over here for the curl cylinder lines. These are both 6-foot hoses. Extendable dipper stick moves like 36 or 40 inches in and out. So there's a little method to my madness of why I chose that hose length. That way they wrap back and forth. That way they kind of like unroll and then roll back up. And the Case 590, 580 machines with Extenda-Hoe, I've been doing this for a really long time successfully. So I kind of modeled my design off of them. And it may be one of the only ways to do it, really, realistically. But this looks clean. That line is tucked up nice and under there. I believe it's too high up to ever hit it with the bucket teeth when you're fully curled in, so that's good, but we will test that. So good. The curl speed seems plenty fine. That's with the machine at idle. It moves just like it did before. So I don't think the 1/2-inch lines are going to burn me on a machine this old, but that's something I really want you to consider if you're building lines for your machine at home. Well, guys, I gotta say that works pretty good. I mean, I'm not surprised. I kind of knew it would, but I was worried that this line would be too close to the bucket teeth. Not the case. All good there. Nothing can hit. Hoses look good up there. The hoses will take a set and kind of drift a little bit in shape. I noticed that with the other side. So like after this sits out in the sun, you use it a little bit, you'll have to crack some fittings loose and clock the hoses a little bit and then tighten them back up. So yeah, that's not how to do it, but that's how I do it. No more floppy rubber hoses hanging down, getting in the bucket teeth, getting caught on things. Pretty clean setup. Now, obviously they are fairly vulnerable up here. I already experienced that. And you can kind of see that tree over there. You do have to be careful trucking through the woods because now your hoses are at a very high point. Now the original Extenda-Hoe hoses are all the way up there anyway. They're just a little more recessed. These are vulnerable to that, and obviously when you're hauling it, bridges, overpasses, beer distributor drive-through, wherever you may end up. Well, anyway, guys, that's all I got for this one. Pretty simple task. I just didn't see any videos on YouTube about how to make these lines at home. So I figured I would figure out how to do it and then show you how I did it. I haven't had one blow out yet. All the tubing's rated for the pressure, so is the fittings. If the flares are good, I think you're pretty safe to do this. So for your machine, keep in mind your flow requirements and the diameter of the tubing you'll need. This machine doesn't seem to mind the 1/2 inch. I mean, a warm hydraulic fluid at 2,500 PSI does move pretty quick, so maybe you don't even need as much tubing as you'd expect. If you want to do this at home, check down in the description. I'm going to post links to every tool and part I used to build this. Like I said, the majority of the stuff comes from McMaster Carr. That's where I get the tube nuts, ferrules, and the actual tubing. And then surplus center for those nice 2-position clamps to hold your hard lines, all the other fittings, the hoses, the hose protecting sleeve, all that stuff. Those guys are really great there. It's fairly cheap. They do bang you a little hard on shipping, but it is what it is. And then, yeah, the rest of the tools you can get right at Home Depot or Amazon or whatever your preferred shopping venue is. I'm not sponsored by any single thing with this entire video. I'll post the links just so you guys can buy it if you need to make your own lines. Anyway, guys, that wraps up another one here at the Spank Ranch. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments. I'll see you next time.